Hello everybody and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Mackenzie Davis. I'm a Maryland realtor, and in today's video I'm going to be telling you guys all about the home buying process and what kinds of loans you can expect to see and which one you should choose depending on what kind of situation you're in, and all of those things that you probably didn't learn in high school and that you probably didn't learn anywhere else, because we just unfortunately don't normalize these conversations, even though most people in this country have a goal of being a home buyer and a homeowner. It's just an unfortunate thing that I am hoping to sort of dismantle with this video. There's a lot of really great things out there for first-time home buyers in terms of discounts, grants, assistance, you name it really, and I think that more people need to know about it. First things first, we need to talk about the 4 different types of loans, because when we're talking residential real estate, when I'm working with clients, these are the loans that I'm seeing most often: VA, USDA, FHA, and conventional. Now, each program is different in itself. They have different requirements and they have different sub-programs. So I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of all of that, but I will give you the basics. For example, VA is a veterans only loan. So if you're not a veteran, you can't qualify for that loan. However, it is a $0 down program, so it's really great for those that can. We have another $0 down option, which is USDA, but it's USDA because it's the Department of Agriculture, meaning that it needs to be in an area that's more rural. I don't exactly know why this is, but I think it is to increase the development in those areas. So that is your other $0 down option. Most typically, I am seeing FHA or conventional loans, and the only real differences is that conventional are not backed by the government, FHA are. Conventional has a higher down payment requirement, FHA has a lower one. FHA is what we use when people have low credit scores, when people need more assistance, typically first-time home buyers. And then conventional loans we see more so with those people who are more stable and have higher credit scores and things like that. But you could use either of them because they don't have any specific requirements like those other programs do, depending on the type of property or the type of person that you are, but instead it just goes based off of income, debt, and credit, which are the 3 factors of all of these loans. So what is helpful to understand is that a 580 or above, you're good to go. You can get an FHA loan, you can qualify for that at least, and you can purchase a home as long as you have income. Now, that's not to say that the higher your credit score gets, you get perks. You get more for your money, you get a lower interest rate, and you can also get more down payment options. But that is not realistic for everyone. And I always say that renting is 100% interest because obviously you're not ever getting that money back. Whereas when you purchase a home, you have that equity and you can take it out and you can get a cash out refinance and you can do a lot of different things with it. So I like to make the point that even if you think you can't buy, it's worth a shot trying if that is a goal of yours, because the requirements are not as stringent as people think that they might be, which also leads me to the point of the down payment, which is not 20%. I think that that is the biggest thing that I hear, where people think they need to come to the table with so much cash, and at the end of the day, 3% is the minimum for conventional loans. It's 3.5% for FHA loans. And you can even buy up to 4 units with an FHA loan and still get 3.5% down as long as you live there. So even if you're an investor and you're a first-time home buyer, or you're looking to get in this space and you don't know how, there are options for people. Now, across states, you have different programs and different things. In Maryland, we have the Maryland Mortgage Program. That is kind of this umbrella of other programs, which includes like the Smart Buy, which is our student loan forgiveness program when you purchase a home. And then we also have 6% down payment assistance, which a lot of times covers all of the down payment or all of the closing costs. And what's really great news too is that you can get seller's help on top of down payment assistance. So while that's not a guaranteed thing, you can't go to a bank and say, I want a loan and I don't have any money, but I'm going to get it all from the seller, because they need to see that you at least have some reserves in your bank account. If you do need extra cash to close and you are working with a realtor, they can often negotiate that for you at the time of the offer. You can actually go to the seller and say, hey, I know that your house is listed for $380,000. I'm looking for $10,000 in seller's help. What if I offered you $390,000 and then asked for the $10,000 in seller's help? Because at the end of the day, the seller's walking away with the equity. They're taking whatever it is that is paid for that house minus their closing costs. So it doesn't matter to them as long as they're kind of netting the same amount. And as long as you're capable of offering more and the home is actually worth more, you know, obviously you don't want to offer too much because then you run the risk of the home not appraising. There are ways to negotiate where you can both, the seller and the buyer, get exactly what you want, and you don't have to worry too much about that extra cash to close, where sometimes it can get pretty costly. The second thing that I will say is that there are a lot of grants out there. I am less experienced with these because I feel like they always differ depending on the lender that you're working with. Some of them have in-house grants. There are federal grants, which unfortunately I think a lot of have been done away with since our new administration took over, but there is still stuff out there, and I encourage you to research it. Put it into ChatGPT, say, hey, what down payment assistance options do you have in this city, in this state? It's almost like scholarships for college. Like, you just need to look for those in places that you find financial assistance, whether that's through your bank or other different types of nonprofits and things like that. I just encourage you to do your research and try to find what's out there. And if you can't, ask someone who would know, like a realtor or a loan officer, where they find their resources. So now that we know the basics of the loan, when you qualify for a loan, you need to know that there are three main pieces, including your income, your credit, and your debt. The best equation you can use to determine how much money you'll be able to afford for a mortgage, because again, this is another question I constantly get, and there is this calculation where if you take your monthly income and you subtract your monthly debts, you get a number, and if you divide that in half, that is how much the bank can use towards your mortgage payment. So for example, let's say you make $4,000 a month, you have $2,000 a month in debt, that sucks. You have $2,000 in the eyes of the bank that you are netting each month, and then half of that is what the bank will let you use for a mortgage payment. So $1,000 would be the maximum mortgage payment that you could have. Then you start thinking about, like, how much do I want to put down? Can I put down more so my mortgage payment's lower? Can I get a lower interest rate? Different things like that are really dependent on those factors being mostly credit. And then again, you really have to consider how much your debt is taking away from your buying capabilities, because sometimes you could pay it off pretty quickly and then turn around and purchase a house that's like $100,000 more than you could have a month ago because you paid off those debts. Typically, I would say you probably have to make around $30,000 to $40,000 a year to qualify for any sort of like substantial home. Now, that is too much of a blanket statement than I even like to give, because I really do think that it just depends. Like, if you're purchasing a $20,000 auction property, maybe you could qualify based on your $10,000 a year income. I don't know exactly. I just tend to find that for people to be comfortable and live in a house that's like move-in ready, they have to make typically like $30,000 to $40,000 at least in my area. And if you get closer to where I grew up, it's even more than that. And so you do have to be cautious about that and where your area of living is, the cost of living, like how much everything is around you, because it really changes depending on what state you are and even what city you are, because 20 minutes from me, I'm looking at completely different price brackets than I am where I am right now. It just kind of depends on a lot of different factors. Unless you're a cash buyer, you're going to need a lender because you need a loan, right? Typically, what I have happen is I'll have a client reach out to me. They're never usually pre-approved if they're first-time home buyers, because other people don't know as much that lenders are like that first step for them. They don't know what a pre-approval is. And so they start with the realtor, which is totally fine. I just always help them find a lender that can get them that pre-qualification, because that's our first step in the process, is figuring out how much you can afford, because everything else will kind of fall in around that. And we don't want to take you to see $400,000 houses if you can't afford them, because that just lets everybody down, right? We waste both of our time. You can't even put an offer in. You got your hopes up, and then now you don't know what you can afford, and you have to go through this whole process and probably be disappointed. So I'd rather just start with what is true and real. And with that, I offer to create a search for them. I send them the information for the lenders that I typically work with, and I say, okay, we're gonna start this search based on your criteria. So let's talk about your criteria, whether that's bedrooms, bathrooms, budget, single family versus townhome, basement, garage, you know, all those things that you want in your house. And I put it into an automatic search, which notifies them every time that there's a new property or something that's coming soon. Then they can let me know and we can go see it and all that good stuff. It's also a really great buffer period for them to then get their pre-approval with the lender, because they have to upload their bank statements and they're gonna get a credit check and all of that good stuff. So we need time for them to start seeing properties for them to do that. I would say pre-approvals could be done in a day. I think most lenders issue them pretty quickly, and especially if you have a house already in mind that you're interested in, because obviously time is of the essence in this business and we don't want you to miss out on the property that you like. All in that first day, you'll get set up with a search and you will start that process with the lender, which is really invasive. And I think people are surprised by this too. They're like, why do you need my bank statements? Why do you need to know where my taxes are and how much I paid and all this stuff? It is just a bank at the end of the day. They have to verify everything. And so they need to make sure they know where your income's coming from and that it's not fake and that your statements are real. And there's a lot that goes into it, which is called the underwriting process. So when you're underwriting your loan, they have people checking these boxes and making sure that you do qualify for this house. And if they have any discrepancies with that, they'll reach out via your lender to get what they need so that they can qualify you for this house and give you the loan. That's also why there's an appraisal during the lending period, because they have to make sure the house is worth what they're about to lend you the money for. There's 3 main points of the contract that are contingency points. You have your inspection, your appraisal, and your financing contingency. Once you go under contract on a property, those things begin. And I will touch on that in a second, but I want to go back to what I was talking about before with the actual process in itself before you even find the house that you're interested in. So you've spoken with your lender, you've spoken with your realtor, you got your pre-approval going, and you're waiting for what's called a pre-approval letter. And that is where your lender will issue you a number that is how much you can afford to purchase based on that calculation that I gave you guys earlier in this video. And you can then take that number and go put it back into your search, the one that I'm running for you, and limit your search to that number, because at the end of the day, you can't go higher than that number. Once you start looking at properties and going out with your realtor to see them and do showings and stuff, you will start to narrow down your search a little bit more, probably adjust here and there, or maybe you find the house that you love immediately. And that's when you would put in an offer. And people are confused about this piece of the process because you're required to submit a pre-approval letter with your offer, which is why I always suggest to do that step 1, because I would hate to see you find that house you love and then want to submit an offer, have to wait 1 to 2 business days for your pre-approval letter, and next thing you know, they have an offer deadline of yesterday at 8 p.m. and you didn't get a chance to put in an offer because you didn't have what you needed at the time that you needed it. Another reason why we do that up front. Yeah. Say you put in an offer on a property and it is not accepted. Nothing happens. You keep moving on, the offer is null, you keep going to look at properties. The offer is accepted, there's a lot of stuff that starts going on. It is pretty fast paced at this point because typically your standard closing is 30 days. And that seems like a long time, but at the end of the day, there's a lot that goes into a closing and a lot of different parties working on the transaction to make sure that it all comes together and that you can close on closing day. Expect, kind of to kick it up a little bit, there's going to be a lot of questions. People are going to be reaching out to you to verify title work, because when you purchase a home, they're recording the title in your name. You're getting a deed of trust that says that you own that property. You have your lender who's underwriting your loan, and then your realtor who's kind of like holding the pieces together, helping you with the inspection, making sure everything goes okay with the appraisal and financing and all of the things in between. Within that first 24 hours, you're going to owe your earnest money deposit. That is an amount that's predetermined with you and your realtor. It applies to your closing costs. It's not an additional cost, but I always tell people to be prepared that if they do something to jeopardize the transaction, that money is forfeited to the seller because they wasted their time having their house on the market when they could have sold it to someone else, because you wasted their time, essentially, is what it's saying. If you quit your job in the middle of this deal and you no longer qualify for a loan, that's not my fault as the seller, and so I don't want to, waste the time. I will say, like, this happens so rarely, and people are typically pretty lenient about it because you can have the lender issue a letter that says that they didn't qualify for financing. It's kind of tricky to play because you have to do it before that financing contingency ends, because that's what that says, is that you're approved for the loan. So it's a very tricky process, and you need to make sure that you are, as a buyer, being the most informed you are throughout this process so that you don't miss these checkpoints and opportunities to really advocate for yourself. And if you go through the inspection and it's not what you were hoping, you do have the right to back out of the contract. That is the second contingency for a reason. So you should feel like you have that ability to buy the house or not, if that's what it comes down to. The inspection contingency in itself is typically 7 days long. So once you go under contract, you have 7 days to schedule your inspection and have it done. You can do whatever inspections you elected to get in the offer. So make sure you also have those conversations before you go under contract, because you don't want them to come back and say, oh, you wanted to do this inspection, blah, 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 you never said that. It doesn't always become an issue, but sometimes it is. So just better to have your back covered than not. Once the inspector comes out, they will kind of show up on the day with you, the buyers, and your realtor. They will do the whole thing without really involving you for the most part until the end, when they will walk you around and show you everything in the house that they noticed. I've had inspectors who will kind of pull you throughout the inspection to show you different things. For the most part, they typically do their thing. I hang out with the buyers while we're sitting at the house, and then they will give us a report at the end with all of those defects in it and any items that really need to be addressed, so that you can look at that and decide, do we want to ask for a credit to fix these items? Do we want to ask the seller to fix these items? Or do we want to just keep on moving because we don't really care what's going on in the house, or there wasn't anything that was bad or whatever? The seller can negotiate with you on all of those things. They can say no to fixing things. They can say no to giving you a credit. When you have your inspection done, if you're not purchasing the house as is, which just means that you're purchasing exactly how it is without requesting repairs, then you do have the opportunity to request those things. You have the opportunity to request the credit, and that's all done on a PIN, which is called the property inspection notice. And that is also the same document that they'll use to negotiate with you if they want to negotiate with you, or they'll just sign it and move on and continue through to that next checkpoint in the contract, which is the appraisal. The appraisal process is something that's a bit complicated because it is done through the lender. The lender orders it and sometimes even pays for it. And when that happens, they are the ones who are responsible for obtaining that information, because of the fact that they want to make sure that the house that they are giving you a loan for is equal to the amount that the loan they're giving you is. What I mean by this is, you could have a house that's listed for $500 billion, but that does not mean that it is actually worth $500 billion. And you could have an agent that didn't really pick up on the fact that it's not worth that much and let their client offer that much. And then you're in a situation where all the houses on the block sold for $1 million less, and you have to close that gap because the house is just not appraising. It's not worth that much money. When I say close the gap, that means either the seller or the buyer has to pay in cash, because there's no lender that's going to make up that difference when they know the house isn't worth that amount of money. 9 times out of 10, the seller covers it, but it is up for negotiation, and the buyer can walk away because, again, it is another point of contingency. That is where you would then figure out, do I want to put this money forward? If they're not going to, if they do put it forward, that's great. And you keep on trucking. Once you get the appraisal, you're moving on and you're really close to closing, and you're getting ready, probably scheduling stuff, probably scheduling closing, getting your utilities transferred. Water is transferred at closing in Maryland, so we only have you transfer electric first. And then after that, you are just waiting for that green light from your lender that says, yep, you were approved for financing and you are good to go with your loan. You have clear to close. And then you're able to close on your property 3 days after they receive that clear to close, which is why, as you can see, it takes 30 days to reach that entire process, because not only is title and lending working on it, but you're also having to go through an inspection and appraisal and make sure that those things are checking the boxes as well. And you don't really see shorter transactions until you start getting into the investor space where they're waiving rights for inspections and appraisals because they don't care as much. That's really the only difference in that ball game, I guess. So you finally reach closing day, and this is the day you've been waiting for when you purchase your house. I will say this day is probably the most exciting. I love to make it a big deal for my buyers. I always do a closing gift. I always take pictures of their first signature and take pictures with them and of them. I post on socials. I just make them feel special because it is a huge milestone for most people, and most people feel that way about it too. And so we always do it big and make them feel special. And really, it is a ton of signing. Hopefully your lender lets you pre-sign, because that means you can do some of it electronically. And then the rest will just be on paper with the title agency. We're a wet signature state, which means that we have to have some wet signatures. We can't do all electronic. So that's what's signed in person. All of the funds are typically wired before closing, so you don't even have to worry about that. But I always advise to bring a blank check along with your IDs, because the blank check, if in case there's any discrepancies, sometimes the lender and the title company, when they balance their numbers, are a little bit off, and they could owe you money or you could owe them money. It would usually be like a few bucks, if anything, but it's better to be prepared than have to run and get a check from the bank or whatever in the middle of your closing. So come with that and your IDs, because they'll need copies of them. They'll walk you through everything you need to sign. They'll show you all of your rights, and they'll make sure you're confident, fingers crossed, most title agencies will, in your rights as a homeowner and all the things that you need to know about being a homeowner. And then you leave and they give you the keys, and that's it, and you own a home. And it's crazy how that is like the finale of the process. But realistically, you did all the hard stuff during that 30-day period, and closing day is just tying a bow on it and making it look pretty so that you can go home to your new house and have a deed recorded and all of that good stuff. So that really is the home buying process. There are tons of more things that go into it that I didn't touch on, just because every transaction is so different, and these were the basics. This is what you can expect in every transaction, right? There are other things that might come up and other things that I might not have talked about, but hopefully whoever you're working with in that moment can guide you through those different points, because it depends where you live, it depends who you're working with, it depends on the seller, on the buyer, and about a million other variables. I hope this video was helpful for you guys. I hope it gave you some insight as to what the home buying process looks like and what you can expect. Maybe gave you some information about loans, what you could qualify for. I hope you have the best home buying journey, because it's amazing. Okay, bye.
Running down to the riptide, taken away to the dark side.